Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Louise and the band, for leading us through that. And I think we managed quite well without any accidents so far. It's been fantastic. So the Bible verse that I looked at with Crystal while she was in the water is a Bible verse that is actually really quite known quite well. And we're going to be looking at two different times where we see storms mentioned. We, as a church, we've said from the very beginning, we love having children in amongst us. And the fact is, if we have children, it means that we're a church that's alive. But if we have children, it also means that it's a loud church. So if your kids are running around, we're totally fine with that. And if you're a parent and you're here, it's always in your mind your child is the loudest, because that's the way it works. But I just wanted to tell you, it's totally fine. I've done a communion service with children having a tea party underneath the communion table. So we're all right about noise. Okay, so the Bible verse that we looked at, I'm going to stand here so I can use both hands. Good, my face is still there. So the first Bible verse I'm actually going to look at today is from Luke. And we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 8, verses 22. Now, to give you just a general gist as to what's been going on prior to this, we've had Jesus teaching, and there's been huge crowds. Now, in today's day and age, if you had a crowd of 20-something thousand people turning up to hear an individual talk, we would think that's amazing, wouldn't you? But in order to be able to do that, there would have probably been some sort of major publicity thing that's been going on, advertisements, billboards. It's been on Facebook, it's been across Instagram, in order to be able to get that sort of a level. Jesus didn't have any of that. Obviously, needless to say, 2,000 years ago, actually that wasn't there. The feeding of the 5,000, I always think is one of those really interesting ones, because we know these figures. These figures are thrown out to us quite often. But this tells us that Jesus had a crowd where there was 5,000. But if you actually read at the bottom, it says 5,000 men. Because back in those days, it was very much a patriarchal, which means it was run by the men in society. So we know that there was 5,000 men that were there. But that actually would mean that there's going to be a lot more, because we also know that there was women there. Now, if you were to go to most churches, you'd probably find that there's something like about 30% men and 70% women. In other churches, that's a little bit more balanced. It might be 60-40. But if we're just going to be, conservative and say it's 50-50, well, your feeding of the 5,000 becomes feeding of the 10,000. And we know that there was children present because, well, what self-respecting parent would leave the children at home? You bring your kids with you. We also know there was a child there because it was a certain young boy who's got some bread and fish, which means that even if we say that by British standards, 2 adults, 2 children, which was definitely not the case then let's just be polite and say that there was maybe 20,000 people there. But I think realistically, it would probably be a lot more than that. So you can imagine that when Jesus has finished teaching and finished preaching, that he's going to be rather exhausted. And over and over again, when Jesus has finished this, he attempts to move on. But as you move on from one place to the next, the crowd just come with, because they want to see, they want to hear more. And so you've got this kind of sense that actually it's difficult for at this point in Jesus' ministry for him to be able to get much peace. So 2 different stories that we're going to look at today is where Jesus is finished, but because there's some groups, some of his disciples within the group that he's got are fishermen, they've got a boat. And so they do the best thing possible. If you want to get as far away from the crowd as possible, you're going to want to be the other side of the lake. And the quickest way across a lake is straight across, isn't it? And by the time that they got there, if the crowd was going to follow, they'd have had to walk around. At least there's a possibility that some of them, they may at least have an hour or so's break before people come and join them again. Granted, some people may have had boats, but it would be very few. So this is kind of what's happening here. So in verse 22, it reads as follows. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross Let's try again, shall we? Let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they got into the boat and started out. As they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. I like that. Hey guys, just want you to know this. It doesn't matter how busy life gets, you're allowed a nap. Okay? If that's the one thing you remember at the end of this service, that's it. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake, and the boat was filled with water, and they were in real danger. The disciples went and woke him, shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and suddenly the storm stopped, and all was calm. Then he asked them, Where is your faith? And the disciples were terrified and amazed. Who is this man? They asked each other. When he gives the command, even the wind and the waves obey him. Even the wind and the waves obey him. So I love this story because it's one that if you've done anything at all to do with Sunday school, it's a story you've probably heard. But I want to just point out the obvious that, you know what, this last year's not been very easy, has it? For the last 18 months, it's been quite difficult. Not just for us that are here in Mere Green and further afield, but also it's been quite difficult for us as a nation and internationally speaking as well. Because we've been in the middle of a pandemic. We're aware of people who have passed away due to what's been going on. It's not just on a health side of things. I mean, for those of you that work within the NHS, you know that your job role has just increased dramatically. But the knock-on effect is that actually across the board, that we will be picking up the tab for this for so long. It's brought many families into financial ruin. It's meant that many families have found themselves in crippling anxiety, trying to work out how they're going to move forwards. Some have lost relatives and so are grieving because of it. Some have been ill themselves and then are struggling with long COVID. We know that financially as a nation, this is going to be a real struggle. For those who are just living normal life but were having ongoing NHS treatment, now are acutely aware that they're on a major waiting list that could potentially mean really dangerous times ahead. As Christians, we use the term storms quite a lot because we actually think it's a really useful way to be able to explain. Life is full of times where it's actually really difficult. And our storms come up multiple different points. And to some of us, it might be an absolutely crippling, raging storm. And it feels like that there's no hope. Yet to the person next to us, just like the amazing British weather, they're having wonderful sunny time. Storms are something that is very localized to us as an individual, or maybe to us as a family, or to those that are around. And I just want you to know that listen, you're not on your own. And for many of us that are here today, actually, this last 2 years has had some real low points in it. Some points where you felt utterly alone, where you felt that actually life is really difficult. And if you're honest, might not even be your fault, but you know that feeling. And with that comes anxiety. And I'd say that one of the major effects of this last 18 months is the way that it has affected the way we think. Because of us having at our fingertips smartphones, and we read our news feed. And our news feed, because of the algorithms, is tailor-measured to us. And if we find ourselves clicking on a few of those stories that are fearful, then the algorithm gives us more because it knows that's what we're clicking on. So to keep us on our phones longer, we are given more and more stories of the same thing. And so for many people, this last 2 years has been a time filled with deep-set anxiety leading to major, deep levels of all aspects of depression. And so, you know, if that's you today, you need to know that you're not alone. And as we've just said, as Christians, we use the term storms quite a lot. It's actually in many of our songs. It's really helpful because when you're in the midst of a real personal difficulty, it is all-consuming and it is completely deafening. And so today I just want you to know that if that's you and you felt that, then you're okay. You're not on your own. I love this because in this storm we have here that Jesus is actually in the boat. I also love that Jesus is having a nap, right? As I mentioned before. But there's having a nap and there's being deeply, deeply asleep. Okay, just going back to that story, it says that the storm was raging so much that the boat itself is filling with water. Okay? My wife sleeps heavy, right? Honestly, I can wake up in the middle of the night and do a song and a dance, and I'd be lucky if she rolls over. But I think if we were in a boat and it was being filled with water, I'm pretty certain that Nick would wake up, right? Anybody else here a heavy sleeper? Wow. Okay, none of you. Wow. Okay. Thanks, Jim. So, but again, so there's that sort of like sense. Jesus is not having a nap. I think they've downplayed this. Jesus is well and truly out for the count. He's having a proper sleep. And then he's woken up and he's told that there's a storm. I love that he needs to be told that there's a storm. But he's told that there's a storm. And it's only at that point that he intervenes. And I think this speaks wonders to us. Because the reality is that no matter how big your storm is, no matter what's going on at the time in the midst of your storm, Jesus is with you, but he's waiting for the invitation. He's waiting for the invitation to be present in a way that can change things. And I just love this. And it's as he's woken up that's when he intervenes. And I think so many of us, and this is myself included in this, is when stuff goes wrong, I instantly go into problem solver mode. I mean, instantly. Anybody else with me on that? Yeah? Okay, one person. That's great. So there's that like sense of like, I'm straight away. I'm trying to devise some crazy plan that's going to get us through this. Because if I've got a plan, then I feel like it's not hopeless. But actually, half the time, my plan makes it worse. Anybody else, right? That's me. I mean, I know that quite often, as I try to problem solve, my problem solving is quite often making the problem worse than it was if I'd have left it alone, right? And I think this is just it. Jesus, in this story here, he's in the boat. He's waiting to be invited. And when he's invited to solve the problem, he does. I think one of the other things I really like about this is that in the boat, the fact that they have a boat symbolizes there's somebody there who knows how to sail, right? There's somebody that actually knows what they're doing. There's at least 4 people that are fishermen in that boat. Okay, so there's also somebody who was a tax collector and a few other people that have got other jobs. But they're not necessarily all sailors. But I love that it's got to a point that even those that are well seasoned at this are afraid. And I think that also speaks to us as well today, is that, you know, maybe you've battled with anxiety for most of your life. Maybe you've battled with depression for most of your life. I often talk about this. For most of my adult life, depression is something that I've struggled with. And for me, it's been a real personal battle. And there's some days I wake up and for no reason whatsoever, I know that I'm low. And sometimes it takes Nick to even point it out. But you see, so there's one thing, it being something that you're used to and that you get used to.